I never intended to become the villain in my own family's story, but sometimes you are forced to pick up a pen and rewrite the ending just to survive. My mother-in-law, Eleanor, had a way of looking at me that made me feel like an uninvited guest in a house I had meticulously built from the ground up. She always made sure I understood my place, usually with a sharp remark or a condescending smile. But the moment she looked me straight in the eye, surrounded by the remnants of a dinner party I had slaved over for hours, and coldly stated, "You're not real family, Sarah. You're just a placeholder," something inside me didn't just break, it crystallized. It hardened into a decision that would change the trajectory of all our lives. My name is Sarah, and for 10 years, I lived in the shadow of the Miller name. When I met David, he was the golden boy of a family that wore their wealth and status like armor. Eleanor was the matriarch, a woman who treated people like chess pieces. In the beginning, I was blinded by the prestige and the way David looked at me. I thought that if I worked hard enough, if I was polite enough, and if I provided them with the perfect granddaughter they so desperately wanted, I would eventually be accepted. How naive I was. The early years of my marriage were a blur of polite microaggressions. Eleanor would comment on my choice of decor, implying it lacked the Miller pedigree, or she would subtly criticize the way I raised our daughter, Lily, as if I were a common nanny rather than her mother. David, bless his heart, was the peacemaker. He constantly told me, "That's just how my mother is, Sarah. Don't take it to heart. She's old-fashioned." But it wasn't old-fashioned to constantly undermine my authority in my own home. It wasn't old-fashioned to make me feel small in front of our friends. David's family owned a massive logistics firm, Miller and Sons. David was the heir apparent, but it was I who had the business acumen. Throughout our marriage, I had secretly used my own inheritance from my parents to invest in real estate and private equity. I was a millionaire in my own right. A fact I kept quiet because David preferred the dynamic where he was the provider and I was the supportive wife. I enjoyed the autonomy of my secret success. It was my safety net, the one place where I didn't have to seek anyone's approval. The tension reached its breaking point on a rainy Tuesday in November. It was my father-in-law, Arthur's 70th birthday. I had spent weeks planning an intimate, sophisticated gala. I had booked the best caterers, handpicked the vintage wine, and even managed to get Arthur's long-lost college roommate to fly in for a surprise. It was supposed to be a night of celebration, a night to finally bridge the gap between Eleanor and me. The gala was in full swing. The ballroom was glowing with soft candlelight, and the music was a perfect blend of jazz and classical. Everything was flawless, or so I thought. I was mingling near the bar when I overheard Eleanor talking to one of her socialite friends, Mrs. Gable. They were standing behind a large marble pillar, unaware that I was just a few feet away. "It's really quite sad, isn't it?" Eleanor's voice was dripping with that signature condescension. David could have married into a family with real standing. Instead, he chose her. She tries so hard, doesn't she? Planning all these parties, playing the perfect hostess. She thinks if she decorates enough rooms, she'll be a Miller. But blood is blood, and she's just not real family. She's just a placeholder until he realizes he needs someone who understands our world. I felt the blood drain from my face. My hands, clutching my glass of champagne, began to tremble. I could have stepped out, confronted her, and caused a scene, but I was raised with a modicum of dignity. I waited until they walked away, my heart pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. As the night progressed, the betrayal felt heavier with every laugh I heard from the guests. I looked across the room and saw David talking to his father, looking so much like his mother it made me sick. I realized then that I had been fighting a war I could never win. They didn't want me to be family. They wanted me to be a prop. And the worst part, David was the silent architect of my misery by never truly standing up for me. The next morning, the house felt colder. I didn't say a word to David. I just poured my coffee and started making phone calls. Not to friends, but to my lawyer. You see, for years, David's parents had been pressuring us to sign a mutual will. They insisted that all of the family's assets, including the properties Arthur had transferred to David over time, should be held in a trust that would be managed by Eleanor and Arthur until David reached 50. It was a control tactic, and they had been badgering me to get on board for months. Because I was David's wife, my signature was required to consolidate certain joint assets into this Miller family trust. I had been stalling, claiming I needed more time to review the legal documents. David had been getting frustrated, complaining that I was being difficult and stubborn. Little did he know, I was the one who held the real power. I went to my office and pulled out the legal files. My lawyer, Mr. Henderson, was a shark in a suit, a man who loved a good battle. I explained the situation to him. I told him I wanted to rewrite my own estate plans. But I also wanted to leverage my position regarding the Miller family assets. Sarah, Henderson said, his voice calm and professional, if you sign these documents, you are effectively giving them control over your share of the joint investments. They've been very clever, but they left one loophole. Arthur transferred the logistics firm stock to David under the condition that if David dies or is incapacitated, it reverts to the Miller Trust, which is currently overseen by Eleanor. What if David changes his own will? I asked. He could, but his parents have him convinced that this structure is for tax efficiency, Henderson replied. However, you have significant personal assets tied into the Miller real estate holdings. You can structure your portion of the assets into a separate, irrevocable trust. If you do that, they can't touch it, and more importantly, you can dictate who gets what in the event of your death or if you decide to pull your funding from their joint ventures. Do it, I said, and I want a clause added to the new will I'm drafting. If I die, my entire fortune, including all the properties I've acquired, goes into a trust for Lily. But Eleanor is explicitly prohibited from being a trustee or having any guardianship rights. And I want to make sure David knows that if he doesn't protect our daughter's interests, he gets nothing from me. It took 2 weeks to finalize everything. During those 2 weeks, I played the part of the devoted wife. I smiled, I cooked, I attended their events. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done. Every time Eleanor looked at me, I saw that flicker of disdain, and every time, I channeled it into resolve. The day of the signing arrived. We were all at Arthur and Eleanor's mansion. The air was thick with expectation. Eleanor had arranged a small luncheon, acting as if this was the biggest day of our lives. Finally, Eleanor said, handing me the pen, "Now we can finally move forward as a cohesive unit. It's about time you stop being so difficult, Sarah." I looked at the documents on the table. They were the same ones I had been reviewing for months. They were designed to consolidate the Miller wealth and ensure that I had no legal say in how the assets were managed. Actually, Eleanor, I said, my voice steady, I won't be signing those. The room went silent. David looked at me confused. Sarah, what are you doing? We talked about this. We talked about what you wanted, David. I said, turning to him. We never talked about what I needed. I've spent 10 years trying to be real family to you all. I've planned your parties, I've managed your household, and I've raised your granddaughter. But as it turns out, I'm just a placeholder. Isn't that right, Eleanor? Eleanor's face turned a shade of pale I didn't know existed. I don't know what you're talking about. I heard you, Eleanor. At the gala, you told Mrs. Gable exactly what you thought of me. And you know what? You were right. I'm not a Miller. I'm a woman who has worked hard to build a life, and I'm done being the person you manipulate. I reached into my bag and pulled out a different set of documents, the ones Henderson had helped me prepare. These are my new directives. I have moved my personal holdings into an irrevocable trust. Furthermore, I have officially amended my will. If you want my signature on anything, you will agree to these terms. My daughter's assets are managed by me and my designated trustees, none of whom are Millers. And any joint property investments I've funded are being liquidated unless you pay me back the fair market value of my investment. With interest, Arthur stood up, his face reddening. You can't do this. This is family business. No, I replied firmly. This is my business. I've been quietly funding your logistics firm's expansion for 3 years because David didn't have the liquidity to handle the tax burdens. If you think I'm going to sign over my legal claim to that money so you can consolidate it under your control, you've lost your mind. David looked between his parents and me, his eyes wide with panic. Sarah, you're ruining everything. They're my parents, and I'm your wife, David, and I'm the mother of your child. Where have you been while they've been tearing me apart? You've been silent. And silence is just another form of betrayal. Eleanor lunged forward, her voice a sharp, desperate hiss. You think you can just walk away? You have nothing without us. You're just a girl from a middle-class family who got lucky. We made you. You didn't make me, I said, a cold, calm smile spreading across my face. I made myself, and I'm taking everything I've built with me. I walked out of that house with my head held high. I didn't look back. I didn't wait for David to follow me, though I heard him calling my name. I just got in my car and drove. The weeks that followed were brutal. The Millers didn't go down without a fight. They tried to sue. They tried to pressure David to divorce me, and they tried to smear my reputation. But because I had been smart, because I had kept my investments separate and clean, their efforts hit a brick wall. Mr. Henderson destroyed them in every deposition. It turned out that their logistics firm had been skirting some regulations that I had flagged long ago. And when the authorities started sniffing around, the Millers suddenly became very interested in settling rather than continuing the legal battle. David eventually realized that his parents didn't care about his well-being. They only cared about the legacy. When he finally stood up to them, demanding that they respect my conditions, they cut him off financially. It was the ultimate test. Would he choose his parents' money and his status, or his wife and his dignity? He chose us. He moved out of his parents' house, and we started over. It wasn't easy. There was a lot of resentment to work through, and I'm not sure I'll ever fully trust him again the way I did in the beginning. But we're rebuilding on our own terms. The best part: Lily is growing up in a home where she is loved for who she is, not for the Miller blood she carries. And every time Eleanor tries to reach out, begging to see her granddaughter, I remind her of the gala. I remind her of that night when she made the mistake of thinking I was just a placeholder. She isn't allowed to see Lily. Not until she acknowledges that I am the one who built the life she once looked down upon. She isn't family. I am. People often ask me if I regret being so ruthless. They ask if I could have handled it with more grace. And I tell them, grace is for people who aren't being actively dehumanized by those they serve. I didn't want to be the villain. I wanted to be a partner. But when you are forced into a corner, you have two choices. You can wither away, or you can build a fortress. I chose the fortress. I learned a lot about myself in that time. I learned that my worth was never defined by the name I carried. I learned that I had the strength to stand up to the most intimidating people in my life. And I learned that money, while often seen as a tool for control, is also a tool for liberation. I've started a new venture now. One that focuses on helping women navigate complex legal and financial situations when they're being gaslit by powerful families. It's my way of turning that pain into something productive. I think about the girl I was 10 years ago, the one who wanted so badly to be loved by Eleanor, and I wish I could tell her that she was already enough. She didn't need the Miller estate, the gala, or the approval of a woman who didn't know the meaning of the word love. She just needed to believe in herself. As I sit here in my own office, looking out at the city skyline, I feel a sense of peace I never knew when I was trying to please the Millers. I'm not looking for their validation anymore. I'm busy building a legacy for my daughter, a legacy of independence, strength, and truth. And Eleanor, she's still in that mansion, surrounded by expensive furniture and empty halls, probably wondering where it all went wrong. She keeps trying to find a way back into our lives, but the doors are locked. She lost her place, not because I took it from her, but because she never earned it to begin with. Family isn't about blood, and it's certainly not about prestige. It's about respect, honesty, and standing by the people you claim to love. When Eleanor said I wasn't real family, she was right. I am something far more powerful than that. I am the woman who saved herself. If there's one lesson I want my daughter to take away from this, it's that she should never, ever let someone else define her reality. Whether it's a mother-in-law, a spouse, or society, the moment you give someone else the power to name you, you lose yourself. Hold on to your pen. Be the one who writes the story. Because at the end of the day, you're the only one who has to live with the chapters you've written. The Millers are just a footnote in my life now. A cautionary tale about what happens when greed and pride go unchecked. I'm the protagonist, and for the first time in a long time, the ending is exactly what I decided it would be. Sometimes, change is messy. Sometimes it's painful. But as I look at my life now, I realize that changing that will was the most courageous thing I ever did. It wasn't about the money. It wasn't about the power. It was about reclaiming my right to be a human being, independent and free. And I would do it all over again in a heartbeat. My life is mine. And that is the greatest inheritance I could have ever asked for. I remember the day the final papers were signed, the day I walked out of that office and realized I didn't owe anyone an explanation. The air felt different, crisper, cleaner. I was free. I had taken the chaos, the fear, and the betrayal, and I had turned it into a foundation. You see, everyone has a breaking point. Most people spend their lives dreading theirs, terrified of what happens when the mask falls off. But I've learned that the breaking point is actually a threshold. It's the place where the old, fragile version of you ends, and the new, ironclad version begins. Eleanor wanted to keep me in the dark, dancing to her tune, but she accidentally gave me the light I needed to see exactly where I stood. And once you can see, you can never be blind again. So, I'll keep building. I'll keep working, and I'll keep loving my daughter with a fierce, independent love that doesn't need anyone's seal of approval. I am Sarah, and I am the architect of my own destiny. And that in itself is the biggest win of all. Life goes on. The seasons change, the city grows, and the past fades further into the rearview mirror. But the strength I found in that boardroom, that's something that stays with me. It's the fuel that keeps me going on the hard days, and the anchor that keeps me grounded on the good ones. I didn't lose a family. I lost a cage. And frankly, the view from the outside is breathtaking. I'm finally home, and I'm finally me. And honestly, that's all that ever really mattered. I don't think much about the Millers anymore. Their relevance has evaporated like morning mist, leaving me with the clear, bright sunshine of my own life. They are a lesson, yes, but no longer a burden. I've dropped that weight, and I've never felt lighter. They thought they could define me. They thought they could shape me into the image they wanted. But they forgot one thing: fire doesn't destroy the diamond. It only clarifies its brilliance. And I have never been more brilliant than I am right now. I hope whoever is reading this, if you are struggling with a family that doesn't see your worth, if you are struggling with a partner who doesn't stand by your side, remember my story. Remember that you have the pen. You can change the will. You can rewrite the contract. You can walk out the door. Your life is not a placeholder for someone else's ego. It is your life. Own it. Protect it. And never, ever let anyone convince you that you are anything less than the hero of your own story. The story is mine, and I'm just getting started. There are new chapters ahead, filled with things I haven't even dreamed of yet. And for the first time in my life, I'm not just the placeholder, I'm the author, the main character, and the person who decides what happens next. That is power. That is freedom. And that is exactly where I belong. I'm moving forward, not looking back. And I'm stronger for every bit of it. Here's to the truth. Here's to boundaries. And here's to knowing your worth even when the people around you are too blind to see it. Especially then. Because when you know who you are, it doesn't matter what anyone else thinks. You are already whole. And that, my friends, is the best place to be. It wasn't an easy road, but it was mine. Every detour, every bump, every moment of fear, it all led to this. And I wouldn't trade a single second of this journey, because it made me the woman I am today. The woman who stood up, the woman who fought, and the woman who finally chose herself. So here I am. And I'm here to stay. My story is a testament to the fact that you are never truly trapped unless you decide you are. There's always an exit, always a path, and always a way to reclaim your life. You just have to be willing to take the first step. And that step? It's the most important one you'll ever take. Take it. Your life is waiting for you on the other side. I'm finally at peace. And that is a victory that no amount of money could ever buy. It's a quiet, steady, enduring peace. The kind that comes from knowing you've done right by yourself. I've paid my dues, I've fought my battles, and I've come out on the other side. I'm Sarah, and this is my life, my story, and my truth. And I couldn't be more proud of the woman I've become, the end, or rather, the beginning. Because life doesn't end when you break free. That's when it truly starts. And I'm ready for everything that comes next. Whatever it is, I know one thing for sure. I'll be the one holding the pen. And that makes all the difference. So, here's to the future, to freedom, and to the strength that lives in all of us. Use it, trust it, and never, ever let anyone dim your light. Because you are the author of your own life, and you deserve to write a story that makes you proud. My journey taught me that we don't need permission to be our authentic selves. We don't need a legacy handed down to us if it comes at the cost of our soul. We build our own legacies. We forge our own paths. And we do it with the courage that comes from knowing who we truly are. I am happy. I am whole. And I am finally, truly free. The story of the woman who changed the will is not a story of greed. It's a story of survival, of dignity, and of the realization that no one can take what is rightfully yours unless you let them. I didn't let them. And because of that, my daughter has a mother who knows her worth. And I have a life that is truly mine, and that is a beautiful, beautiful thing. I've learned to forgive, not because they deserve it, but because I deserve the peace that comes from letting go. I don't hold on to the anger. I don't hold on to the grudge. I hold on to the lessons. The lessons are the true inheritance, the ones that guide me forward, the ones that teach me how to live with intention and how to love with clarity. Everything happens for a reason, they say. And maybe the reason for all that heartbreak, all that drama, and all those years of feeling like a placeholder was to lead me to the exact place I am right now. A place where I am standing on my own 2 feet, looking toward a horizon that is wide open, bright, and entirely, unmistakably mine. I'm grateful for the path I walked, even the parts that were paved with stones. They made me stronger, more resilient, and more attuned to the things that truly matter. I'm grateful for the woman I've become, the one who wasn't afraid to walk away when the cost of staying was too high. So, I'll close this chapter now, but I'll keep the book open. There are so many stories left to write, so many dreams left to pursue, and so much life left to live. And I'm going to live it all with my head held high, my heart open, and my spirit unbroken, because I'm not just a daughter-in-law, or a wife, or a mother. I am a person, a woman, a force of nature, and I am enough. I have always been enough, and now, for the first time, I believe it. Here's to moving on. Here's to finding your power. And here's to knowing that, no matter what happens, you have the strength to change the ending of your own story. Always. It's time to live. And that's exactly what I'm going to do. One day at a time, with purpose, with passion, and with the joy that only true freedom can provide. Thank you for listening to my story. It wasn't easy to share, but it was necessary. If you're in a situation where you feel small, where you feel unheard, or where you feel like you're just a placeholder, please listen to me. You aren't. You are the main character of your own life, and you have the power to change everything. Don't wait for permission. Don't wait for the right moment. Take the pen, write your own ending, and don't look back. You're worth it. You've always been worth it. And that, my dear friends, is the real truth. I hope my story inspires you to find the strength within yourselves. It's there, I promise you. You just have to be willing to reach for it. And when you do, everything changes. Everything. I'm finally at peace. And that is the greatest gift of all. It's quiet, it's steady, and it's mine. And for the first time, I am home.